And I love that because it's constantly being recreated.
Yeah. She also, in a podcast episode she recently did with Tony, refers to the fact that she's been married for decades. And, they say
Mm,
multiple people nowadays have multiple marriages. She says, I've had multiple marriages just with the same person. And it's
exactly.
interesting because as you and your partner do the work and evolve and, become shapeshifters, and I want to get into that in a moment, that is really, people talk about keeping the spark alive and how to renew your passion for each other, but this is definitely one way of doing it, is to feel like you are seeing the different sides of your partner throughout time.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. I mean, it's this thing about in relationship. It's that thing of like, are we in relationship to just do our thing, or are we in relationship to actually be with the person that we're with,
Yeah.
and to get to know them more deeply? And that's been a primary goal of my life in relationship, is to find a place where I can reveal myself and be seen and heard and felt and honored, and to do the same for my partner. And when Jai really discovered the blueprints and we adopted them in our life, it just opened up the floodgates of so much misunderstanding. And it got us past disconnection and got us back to connection without the blame, without the shame, without the criticism, because now we had a place to play where we could discover anew, like, oh, fascinating.
And
you're turned on by that.
So much passion, there's like there was this one instance where Ian had his hands like hovering over my genital area, and I was just feeling like so connected and so turned on, and all of a sudden he like got up. And for an energetic, when you leave energetically like that, it just feels like you just took like a plug and pulled it out of a light socket very violently. And so I was like, what is going on? And he went over to the music, and I started getting it. Go ahead.
I changed the song and I changed the volume, and I was just because and then Jai said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What did I say?"
You said, "It's just my sensual."
It's just my sensual.
Yeah.
And then I could laugh. It was
Yeah.
a big moment of disconnection and anger rising in my
You don't
body
understand me,
and not understanding. And here I could just go, oh, okay, he's doing that actually for me, because he knows that he can't be fully present with me because that music is getting him up in his head and he's getting distracted. And if he just goes and takes a second to fix that, he can come back to me with his full presence. What a difference.
But I tell you, there's technique to separating from an energetic, and I didn't use it. That's where my skill level could have been much better.
You just said one word, you said it's my sensual, and she immediately understood. And I love how, there's so many opportunities for miscommunication in couples, and you sort of, you headed it off at the pass, right? And didn't allow it to escalate. And for, and when you're in your head, you're dead, right? Like when people, their mind spins, what's the possible reason why we are disconnected? I mean, that's the scary stuff. So just being able to stop a potential miscommunication before it can even start, I think that's, worth its weight in gold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge benefit. Yeah. So do we have a drum roll? Are we on to
shapeshifter? Well, I also want to note too that I think people, when they hear the word shapeshifter, I certainly do. Don't you think of Maui from Moana? Right? Like I was like, shapeshifter, so you can become an eagle or a whale or
exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's just the beauty of the shapeshifter. It can transform to be anything. So a shapeshifter is someone who can speak all of the language. If you think of these as languages, it's like the energetic is this Chinese and the sensual is like a beautiful French. And then we've got American English for our sexual. And then we've got like some kind of exotic, like an old Persian and something like that for the kinky. And shapeshifter can be multilingual. And that's their beauty. That's their superpower. They can shift to be anything for anybody. So they can be an ultimate lover because they can mold and shift and change themselves to please another person very easily because they're turned on by all of these things. And a lot of times they have the ability to do all of these things. And that means that they also have all the capabilities of all of the different blueprints and their orgasmic superpowers. The other side, though, is the shadow, is that they also have the ability to have all the shadow sides. And I almost think of it as a 6 type. If you have all the shadow sides and none of the positive sides, it's like a shadow shapeshifter versus the shadow of the shapeshifter. And so the shadow of the shapeshifter is, I'm going to always shapeshift to please everybody else. And therefore, I'm never really satisfied, because let's say your partner's a sensual and you're shapeshifting to be a sensual, then you're only speaking one of your blueprints. So I find that shapeshifters are the ones who are in the most starvation sexually and pleasure-wise, because they judge themselves as being too much. I need too much. I want too much. Asking for what I really want is too much. And they so easily can shapeshift to mold to be somebody else, to please somebody else, that they're never really asking for, hey, you know what? I need all of these things. Can you give me all of these things tonight?
Yeah.
And one of the aspects of the shapeshifter is that they just have a voracious appetite. They could take, you could be 3 hours into a lovemaking session with a shapeshifter where you've got feathers going and music and straps tying them down.
Chocolate in their mouth.
And you've had intercourse multiple times and you've got 8 hands and, you're completely working them over and you're done. And the shapeshifter's like, hey, we just got started. Where are you going?
Yeah.
And so that can be a challenge for the shapeshifter in getting their needs met, because there is such a voracious appetite for pleasure.
And a judgment of that, I'm a bottomless pit and that's a bad thing. No, it just means you have a huge capacity to receive pleasure. If each of the blueprints was an instrument, you are an entire symphony orchestra that can put on a cacophony of sensation and pleasure and sound, and you're just really erotically sophisticated. So if you're a shapeshifter, it really is important for you to shift that frame of yourself as bad or too much. Or it's easier for me just to please everybody else, into really getting yourself fed. And I'd say in all the blueprints, if you're starving, it comes out snippy. You might get snippy. You might get these little arguments with your partner. You might start building up resentment. And from a somatic approach, your body is building up tension and armor and resentment. And so we want your bodies to be supple and receptive and able to really feel pleasure at their full capacity. And a shapeshifter has the great ability to do that.
Yeah.
So you talk about, when your needs are not met, when that's how it comes out. It's almost like functional medicine, right? So if you're not fueling your body with the nutrition that it needs, you start being symptomatic. That's where brain fog, depression, anxiety, the other sort of physical symptoms of this deep-seated problem, it comes out in all these ways. And so it's interesting because everybody wants to diagnose the root of the problem, and in this case I think people could go for